In this episode, Rodney tells us all about the 2019 Stanley Cup Finals and why he's going to be saying, "Let's go Blues."
This is crazy.
Everywhere you turn, it's the same old sports talk, the same headlines, the same news, and the same boring information. This podcast is here to change all of that. We bring you hot sports takes, winning sports betting strategy and picks, reliable gaming industry news, and breaking interviews with some of the biggest names in sports business. My name is Ryan Knuppel, and welcome to the Knup Sports Show.
Hey guys, this is Rodney from the Knup Sports Podcast. Thanks for tuning in, and glad to be back here as we try to bring you some more sports betting and sports talk. And today's topic, as you all know, or most of you know, I and most of the Knup Sports crew are huge St. Louis Blues fans. Yes, that's hockey, and the Stanley Cup is coming up with first game coming up on Monday, which is May 27th. So I thought I'd just break down a little bit of the Stanley Cup and what's going on and talk a little bit of betting talk with the Stanley Cup as well. As we come into Game 1, again, coming up Memorial Day, Monday, the Boston Bruins are the favorites. Boston Bruins are minus 150, while the St. Louis Blues are plus 130. There is no betting line yet for Game 1. We'll get to that as we get closer. But the Boston Bruins are a little bit of favorite, which Vegas puts them right around about 58% chance of winning. And then, of course, the St. Louis Blues with about 42% of winning. And the Blues have never won a Stanley Cup. In fact, haven't been to the Stanley Cup since 1970. Boston Bruins have. So, obviously, the Boston sports world has been plenty excited with everything that's been going on. The Patriots doing really well. And the Celtics kind of took a little fall, and then the Red Sox, obviously, defending World Series champions. So, Boston's seen their share of champions here lately. And if you look at the last few times Boston and St. Louis have met in the postseason in sports, not real good. Not real good for St. Louis, as Boston's kind of ran them over here. If you remember, twice in the last 15, 20 years, the Red Sox have demolished the Cardinals, and the Patriots took down the Rams one year in the Super Bowl. And so really within the last 20 years, Boston has completely dominated when it's come to championships against St. Louis. Hopefully for Blues fans, this one will be different. Let's talk a little bit about what has been going on this year. The Bruins finished with the third best record in the National Hockey League. They entered the season with 11-1 odds to win the Stanley Cup. They were near the top, and it was kind of coming from the Eastern Conference, and there were several teams in the Eastern Conference that you knew they were really good, but you weren't sure who was the best. And obviously Boston, we'll talk about who they've beat in the postseason here in a minute, but Boston came in 11-1. The St. Louis Blues are an interesting story because they had a great offseason. In fact, many experts say the Blues won the offseason. They won the June, July, August. I guess it's more like July and August than anything because the guys start skating again in September. But they were 30-1 on opening night. There was a few people that were, I think this Blues team is going to be really good, could compete in the Western Conference. But most had other teams, including Nashville, including Vegas, Winnipeg, who the Blues beat this postseason, even San Jose. And then the Blues fell to last place in the entire NHL. I'm sure if you've watched any hockey, you have heard this story. Fell to very last in all of the National Hockey League and came in at 250-1 odds. If you are that guy that has the Blues at 250-1 odds, congratulations and good luck this week. And you are looking at a payday if the Blues can find 4 more wins. St. Louis turned its season around, won 30 of their last 45. And then knocked off the Jets in 6, the Stars in 7, and San Jose in 6. This is the Blues' first trip since the championship round back in 1960-1970. We're swept by Boston then, coincidentally. And they are tied with Toronto for the longest drought in NHL history of not winning a cup. So it kind of gives you a little background of what's going on with the teams. The schedule, Monday, May 27th. Is in Boston. Monday, May 27th is in Boston. That is Game 1. Game 2 then is Wednesday, May 29th. That's again in Boston. So first 2 games will be in Boston. Then it comes to St. Louis. Now, one thing I don't like about the NHL and Stanley Cup playoff format now is they are taking 2 days off in between. 2 travel days to get from Boston to St. Louis, is one all the way through the postseason. You would play, you'd take a day off, you would play, you would take a day off, you would play. Now we're going 2 days off. So Game 3 is on Saturday. Game 4 is on Monday, June 3rd. Game 5, if needed, will be in Boston, back in Boston, for Thursday, June 6th. And then if there is a Game 6, that would be back in St. Louis on Sunday, June 9th. And then Game 7, the deciding Game 7, the last game of the 2018-2019 season in the National Hockey League will be Game 7, Blues at Bruins, Wednesday, June 12th. And all hockey fans hope they see that. All these games are at 7 o'clock Central Time, 8 o'clock Eastern Time, as we have a Central team and an East Coast team. Shouldn't have too many late-night games unless we go to big-time overtime, which could happen. Could happen in the NHL playoffs. One more thing I kind of wanted to throw out there. The St. Louis Blues have won all 3 series so far on their home ice. So if you're looking for that route, maybe Blues in 6. I'll give you my pick when we sign off here. But if you're going that route, Blues in 6 sounds good. The St. Louis will host Game 6. Obviously, 5 and 7 are in Boston, so that's where we're at with that one. But the Blues and Bruins, another storyline for the Stanley Cup Finals. The former captain of the St. Louis Blues, a longtime favorite in St. Louis, is David Backes. He now plays for the Bruins, part of that 4th line. And it's kind of funny to see because both teams have real good 4th lines, which is big in the National Hockey League, obviously, so you don't have to send out your top dudes all the time. You need a little depth. They both got depth. They both seem to be coming in fairly healthy. Obviously, the Boston Bruins are going to have more of a break, but I don't know if that's going to play a factor. I don't know if the break's going to play a huge factor in rest. I mean, I guess it could play a factor the other way in that Boston could be rusty. The last time they played, Thursday, May 16th. So they will have basically 10 days off in between their games. The Blues will have They'll have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday off. So they have 5 days off. So they're both going to be rested. I mean, the Blues aren't going to be terribly weary after finishing up Game 6 on Tuesday and turning around and playing the following Monday. I mean, hockey players have played back-to-back, not back-to-back, but every other night here for the last 3-4 weeks. So I don't see that necessarily being an issue, but it should be interesting to see how the Bruins come back from the long break. If you're looking at players to watch, we've all seen for the St. Louis Blues, Jaden Schwartz, 2 hat tricks this postseason. That is a franchise record. Vladimir Tarasenko did score a point in every game of the Western Conference Finals for the Blues. He became the 3rd player in Blues franchise history to score 30 career playoff goals, which joins Brett Hull and Bernie Federko. Alex Pietrangelo, Braden Shen both had big games in Game 6. Pietrangelo now has the most points by a defenseman in St. Louis Blues history. That beats Al McInnes. Remember Al McInnes back in the 1999 season. And then Jordan Bennington's been the big story for the St. Louis Blues. The young, he's 25, but the rookie goaltender for the Blues saved all 10 shots in the 3rd period. Weren't necessarily high impact. They weren't necessarily high risk shots. He's now 12-7 in the postseason. 2.36 goals allowed. He was a Calder Memorial Trophy finalist. I don't know if we're going to win that or not. And he became the 5th rookie netminder in NHL history, and first in 32 years to be responsible for each of his team's first 12 wins in the playoffs. Patrick Waugh was a rookie back in 1986, and he had 15 wins for Montreal. Jordan Bennington, 4 wins away from possibly doing that. So should be interesting to see. Obviously for the Boston Bruins, they are a very talented team. They were 11th in the National Hockey League in goals with just over 3. Their defense has been good all season long. They were tied for 3rd, giving up just over 2.5 per game. Giving up 29.5 shots, though, and they were one of the most penalized teams. Going to have to stay disciplined in this. Although the Blues weren't real good on the power play, really bad against the Dallas Stars on the power play. Got better against San Jose, added a couple goals in that series, which obviously were huge goals. But let's be honest, the big key for the Boston Bruins. Tuukka Rask, the goaltender, played in started 45 games for the Bruins. So he's pretty rested because 45 regular season games isn't really that many compared to other starters. I mean, Jordan Binnington's around there too, but he started a little bit later in the season. It was 27, 13, and 5 in the regular season, allowing 2.48 goals per game. He had a nice season, and he's one of the best goaltenders, probably the best goaltender the Blues have faced this postseason, although Ben Bishop of Dallas, when the Blues got through him, there's a huge sigh of relief because he was good, and he is a very good goaltender. It's tough to say who's better between Tuukka Rask and Ben Bishop. And then, of course, you got the rookie on the St. Louis side. So, I mean, it's really hard to determine who's got the goaltending leg up over one or the other. I mean, Tuukka Rask's been in the league longer, obviously. At 32 years old, Tuukka Rask. So it'll be interesting to see. He was a first-round draft pick by the Maple Leafs, I believe, way back in 2005. So he's been in the league quite a long time, whereas Jordan Binnington just saw the National Hockey League this year. I mean, it's hard to give an edge there. Both goalies have been tremendous. Obviously, a huge key is going to be which goalie is better. If you're looking at scoring, I mentioned the Blues with Vladimir Tarasenko is their top scorer, but Jaden Schwartz has been their postseason guy. Brad Marchand of the Boston Bruins has been fantastic. Scored 100 points in the regular season. 36 goals, 64 assists. Wow, was tremendous in the regular season. Been pretty good in the postseason as well, as he scored goals in each of the last 2 games. Also scored just 1 in the Columbus series and not netted 4 against Toronto. Because if you remember right, Boston Bruins were facing basically elimination against Toronto in the first round. So both teams have faced plenty of adversity. Bruins, I didn't get to that. Bruins were down 1-0, tied at 1-1. Went to Toronto and lost, so they were down 2-1. They picked up a win in Game 4. So it was Game 5. Lost Game 5 at home 2-1. Down 3-2, got to go to Toronto. You win in Toronto, so you push it to Game 7, come back home, and you blast the Maple Leafs in Game 7 to win that series 4-3. Then you got Columbus coming in. And you split the first 2 at home. Probably a little bit disappointed you split the first 2, thinking you could possibly win both games at home. Then you go to Columbus and you actually lose Game 3. So you're down 2-1 again. Second time in the series, you're down in the series. You pick up a road win 4-1 in Game 4, and then seal the deal in Game 5 and 6 in Columbus. Game 6, 3-0 shutout. So that's kind of how the Bruins got there. And then this Carolina series was a complete blowout as they scored 17 goals. Bruins scored 17 goals, just allowed 5, absolutely running through the Carolina Hurricanes. A very, very hot Carolina team as well, a team that many thought was destiny. So, you look at St. Louis, with all the storylines they got going on, last to first type thing. You've got the anthem singer Charles Glenn, you got the cancer survivor Layla, you're singing Gloria. You've got all of these storylines for the St. Louis Blues, and now you've got Boston, who's just been chilling out, playing the best hockey of anybody in this postseason. They trailed in that first series, so they're 4-3 there. They went 4-2 the next series, so 8-5, 1-4. So they won 12 out of 17 in the postseason. I mean, you know who the hotter team is here, although the Blues have all the energy just coming off the wins. And the Bruins have won 7 in a row. In fact, the last time the Bruins lost, April 30th. So we're nearing a month from the last time the Bruins lost. And part of that is your 10 days off in between. But, I mean, this team is figuring out and finding ways to win. So it'll be interesting to see there. A couple more things on the player stats. David Krejci's another name. Patrice Bergeron. Those guys in that top line. David Pastrnak. I mean, all those guys can really score, can really pass the puck. I mean, those guys combined had, I don't think it's got to be somewhere like 350 points between them. I mean, Marchand with 100, Pastrnak with 81, Bergeron with 79, and Krejci with 73. So you do the math on that and tell me that's a lot of goals. That's a lot of points. And like we said, they've got a good fourth line. We talked about David Backes, played in 70 games, who scored 20 points. Now he's not as much of a scorer as he was back in the day. And then you've got, I don't know what's the status of Zdeno Chara. He did return to practice. Big defenseman, 6'9". He's going to go against guys like Colton Parayko. Obviously, Alex Pietrangelo is the captain on the defensive side for the Blues. So that's something to watch, how healthy he is, but he did come back to practice. And that's kind of what St. Louis did to San Jose. They wore him down and beat him up. Not necessarily physical, not necessarily dirty, because they didn't get called for very many penalties. But they beat up the Sharks, and the Sharks were very short-handed at the end of Game 5 and at the start of Game 6, which resulted in 2 back-to-back 5-1 losses for the Sharks. All right, we'll wrap up the Knup Sports podcast, the NHL Stanley Cup preview. Again, I'm Rodney Knuppel at Knup Sports, KNUPsports.com. Check us out as we have all the information on the Stanley Cup betting. We have NBA Finals coming up. I just want to talk real quick. I will be covering the Stanley Cup. Looking forward to it. In St. Louis, Games 3, Game 4, and if a possible Game 6, I will be there. I will have coverage, so check out the site, check out our Facebook, check out our Twitter, and if you want to stay up to date on the NHL playoffs, the Stanley Cup Finals, I will try to do that for you. Looking forward to being part of the credentialed press at the Stanley Cup Finals in St. Louis. It's a bucket list thing for me. My team's there, and I'm covering it. Looking forward to that. So if you want to send me a message on what you would like to see covered, go ahead and do that at Twitter, Knuppel, Knuppel, Rodney, or just send us an email, and that'll get across to us. As far as my official prediction, I am going to be a complete homer and go with the complete storyline. St. Louis Blues come back to Game 6 and win the Stanley Cup. I think the first 4, it's going to split. If I had to guess, I would say split in Boston, split in St. Louis. Game 5 goes to Boston. The Blues find a way to win. And then Game 6, St. Louis Blues win their first ever Stanley Cup final with a win there. So I am betting the St. Louis Blues if I am going out to Westgate Superbook or anywhere like that. That's who's offering the plus 130 line right now is Westgate. Anywhere you want to bet, obviously, if that's the case, Boston minus 150, St. Louis plus 130. I'm betting St. Louis. I'm taking the underdog. I'm taking the storyline. It's just not enough value, not enough interest in taking Boston as far as, they're a very good team. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they're not the team necessarily to beat, but I think you get a little bit more value out of St. Louis, and I think there's certainly more storylines. I know storylines don't win cups, but I think there's more there. So plus 130 for the St. Louis Blues is my pick. All right, we'll talk more as the series gets going. This is our 50th podcast, so thanks for tuning in. If you like what you hear, give us a review, spread the word. I'm Rodney from Knup Sports Podcast. So long for just a while.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Knup Sports Show. If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider subscribing to our iTunes channel today. Plus, visit us at knupsports.com for more picks, previews, strategy, and news. That's KNUPsports.com.